sovereignty issues. It is negotiating to abandon responsibilities in the matter of maritime rescue and air traffic, which has now are under Spanish responsibility. And finally, Spain accepts the blackmails from Morocco on migration. For instance, accepting repatriation of migrants not to Morocco but to occupied Western Sahara. With this attitude, Spain has delegitimized itself as an actor that can play an active and positive role in resolving the Western Sahara issue. Spain acts in contradiction with the principle of Spanish foreign policy and international law. The past and current governments don't correspond to the demands of the population in Spain who support another behavior. And all Spanish governments have renounced being an active actor on this issue in the EU. To conclude, the Western Sahara issue is not just another conflict that the international community must appease and resolve in a conventional manner. The framework is decolonization, and what we see these days in Gaza should make us think. Consenting to and covering up illegal situation indefinitely has consequences, and not everything can be negotiated to satisfy both parties as if they have the same legitimacy. Colonialism and occupation must be dismantled. The EU cannot look the other way. The Western Sahara issue should not be the concern of a few member states. It has to do with southern neighborhood. How can the EU have high-level relation with Morocco when this country illegally occupies and has annexed territories? If the EU is not going to act, it had better not to include democratic conditionality clauses in its association agreement. Faced with the European response to the aggression suffered by Ukraine, two other cases, Palestine and Western Sahara, are sad proof of the double standards and incoherence of European foreign action. This cannot continue. The EU and its member states must decide whether they want to be part of the solution or remain with their complicity part of the problem. Spain doesn't align due to its hard interest with its two southern neighbors, but it cannot maintain any neutrality, not even cynically called active. Spain must act coherently with international law and assume an active coherence. And for obvious reasons, Spain should have another role in the EU. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, many thanks. Also on behalf of Bemeshare for coming here and discussing with us. Now, we should have a discussion, but we already came to the end of our time. But I mean, we can start with the discussion until they kick us out of this room. So if anybody wants to add something or ask questions to our guests today.
Gracias. Voy a intentar expresarme en español. Seguramente el señor va a hacer un esfuerzo para entenderme. Pero es para ser lo más claro posible. Tenemos pocos minutos, pero quiero decir que aquí la exposición de nuestro amigo Lobat sobre la libre asociación como posible solución del problema académicamente puede verse como una posibilidad posible o perfecta. Pero lamentablemente nosotros no estamos en esa etapa donde se ve esta idílica imagen donde se respeta la ley. Estamos viendo actualmente todos lo que que ocurre en Palestina con Israel, y vemos que los palestinos tienen una autonomía de Israel y conforme a los acuerdos de Oslo podría ser una solución bonita, perfecta, posible, que ustedes ven en qué se ha convertido actualmente, y todo el mundo comprenderá que la autonomía se convierte en una pesadilla, en una prisión para los pueblos que la aceptan, particularmente cuando la otra parte no tiene ningún respeto al cumplimiento de la ley, ni a la democracia, ni a nada. Solo se basa en su propia fuerza. Y si su fuerza está acompañada con una complicidad de la comunidad internacional y particularmente de los grandes poderes, vemos que Palestina queda como una huérfana del derecho internacional, donde no se respeta nada. Todo lo que hemos estudiado en las universidades, yo he hecho la carrera de Derecho. Todo lo que he aprendido se convirtió en nada después de esta intervención que ha habido recientemente contra todo. descarrilar la cuestión del Sáhara Occidental, del proceso de descolonización, y ponerla en un marco interno, donde Marruecos es la ley, donde el rey de Marruecos es la ley. Y eso nosotros no podemos aceptarlo nunca. Por eso la vía más adecuada y que zanja el problema definitivamente, y esto ya lo ha entendido el rey de Marruecos, que estuvo Hassan II, y que firmó con nosotros el acuerdo de paz en 1991, de que o bien el Sáhara es marroquí o bien el Sáhara es saharaui. Después vino el actual rey y quiso poner las cosas de otro modo. Nosotros no vamos a aceptar de ningún modo, aunque tengamos que luchar 100 años todavía por la vía militar, nunca vamos a aceptar ser parte de Marruecos, ni como una autonomía, ni como una libre asociación, porque no existe libre asociación. Entre la víctima y el verdugo no puede existir ni compromiso ni asociación. Marruecos nos está ofreciendo una autonomía después de ocupar parte de nuestro país. Y nos está diciendo, es como el que ocupa tu casa y de repente cuando ve que la ley, que el juez viene y que la policía viene, te dice, yo puedo alquilarte una habitación de tu casa, pero yo tengo las llaves y yo puedo abrir y cerrar, yo tengo la llave del agua, yo tengo la llave de la electricidad, y si quieres te alquilo esta casa, te alquilo esta habitación barata, con un precio barato, un precio módico. Esto es inaceptable.
I hope everybody else understood a bit more than me. So if there's still something else somebody wants to add, now would be the moment.
I apologize, I need to go. I thought we finished at a quarter till.
Finish out, you find out yourself, or because my colleague could help you if you...
شكرا جزيلا عليك.
Queremos retenerte un minuto con nosotros más.
عندنا الفرصة للكلام.
إن شاء الله. إن شاء الله. Gracias. شكرا.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks. No, I mean, since this is the intergroup, I was curious a bit to talk about EU policy, because this is, of course, the core lever for our MEPs on how we can affect EU policy towards the conflict, rather than, I mean, as much as I'm always stimulated by Hugh, what I would have liked to hear from Hugh, but maybe the other speakers, is how can you mentioned the incentives, you developed this a lot on Israel-Palestine. What levers are there to push Morocco into a different behavior?
I would plug my report. 2021.
Thank you. We'll read it. And so that's a bit the question. I mean, one of the questions is, what tools do you see as external experts or observers in terms of what can be done especially after the court ruling? My second question, we've seen on Palestine, some member states are increasing a discussion about going it alone when there's no common, hymn sheet at the council. And so we're seeing some member states, such as Spain, who we talked about, Belgium saying, well, we're looking into unilateral recognition of the state of Palestine. To what extent, and we were also talking about when, could you see scope for some of our member states, EU member states, taking the initiative? I'd be curious in hearing your voices.
On the question of pressures, yes, I mean, a lot of the EU foreign policy or whatever has the strong connotation related to economic relations and so on. One of the weights that can be carried by Europe has to do with its economic dimension and might, Of course, presumably, if beyond even the question of the fisheries and so on, which is very specific. If there would be enough consensus within the EU for sanctioning, Morocco for its illegal occupation there, as there have been discussion here and there about sanctioning Israel as Russia is being sanctioned for its occupation of Crimea. I'm sorry to say I'm a bit skeptical because, again, of the divided setting you have, the divisions that are not necessarily expressed in a way, but that exist. So to have the notion that Europe as a whole might move into, heavy sanctions against Morocco for its illegal occupation, I see it's very unlikely. Also because, as I said earlier, different European countries, as I say, either are disinclined to antagonize, let's say, France or the US over Western Sahara, frankly, or they have individual and national interests that range from the economic for Spain, in some measure for France, to the strategic, to the security matters, for geographical, Ceuta and Melilla and the migrants and so on. So each one has its own angle. But for that to be forgotten, to have a kind of joint position, I mean, it would make a lot of sense if one cares for the rule of law and to be consistent, because the question of double standards is appalling nowadays, because double standards that one can see so commonly applied around the world is really one of the biggest threats to international peace and security. Because besides the right of Sahrawis and so on, the more you violate this common covenant of what the rules should be to govern international relations, the more you move into threatening conditions for peace and security. So, but I mean, this is a kind of the theory. In practice, I don't see it happening very likely that the EU could move in a way that is relevant enough. I mean, there could be some country here and there who might be to tighten a bit the noose, but the interests are many. On the fisheries, for instance, there is so many countries involved, and somehow even the Scandinavians, because for instance, when there was a restriction on the fishing activities of the big fleets of the north, there was an opening up on that front. So anyway, within the UN is a similar situation. What is interesting also is there is no the relevance of the support for Morocco extended by the US and France and so on conditions a lot the choices of others. Many countries don't want to have a fight over Western Sahara. They think, and it is also very upsetting when it comes to essential rights and the rule of law and so on. There are no big issues or small issues. I mean, these are the essential of international relations. There are no, because there are more dead or more blood is being spilled here or there, then you have a hierarchy. No, that shouldn't work that way. There are certain principles that are equally relevant, whether it's 10 million people or whether 300,000 people, whether it's 10 people killed or 10,000 people killed. I know it sounds a bit theoretical, but it is a fact. Should be a fact anyway. That's I don't see also in the UN much movement on that account. Sometimes the UK seems to be wavering. I'm talking about the Security Council a bit on issues related to some more proactive role, also on human rights and so on. But otherwise, the other big, I must say, with all no frankness, the other big actor that I feel it's inadequate, also in terms of economic relations and so on, is Africa. African countries, of course, there are some that say the right thing, some, especially South Africa or Nigeria. But I think that after all, Western Sahara is in Africa. And if you think, for instance, this group of very influential friends that I mentioned earlier, there is not a single African country. There is no single country that recently experienced the situation of decolonization. It's really paleocolonialism, these five countries running the show on Western Sahara, really.
Maybe anybody else wants to react on that?
How many minutes we have?
I mean, I need to run, but I have heard from my colleague you have the room until 1:15. So if you still want to discuss for 10 minutes, I would just need to leave in like 2 minutes.
¿Quieres añadir algo, Rafael?
Okay, then maybe we can to natural end.
No, yo simplemente...
On time.
On time, nearly on time, yeah. 20 minutes.
Yo simplemente voy a
Next time I
decir
prepare
que para abundar un poco en lo que ha dicho Bastaglia, es lo que podemos es insistir en la necesidad de que se respete la legalidad internacional. No puede haber nada intermedio entre el ocupante y el ocupado, el agresor y la víctima, sino el respeto a la vida. Esa es la mejor divisa que podemos observar y que podemos aceptar. Cualquier otra cosa es una concesión a la ley del más fuerte. On ne peut pas accepter de laisser une opportunité à ceux qui sont les plus forts. La loi du plus fort debe siempre ser observada la ley como la necesidad para la convivencia y el respeto de la comunidad internacional. Y la ausencia de los pesos y medidas. La Unión Europea no puede condenar la invasión de Ucrania y tener las manos quietas en la cuestión del Sáhara Occidental. La ley dice que los saharauis existen, de que tienen su territorio y de que tienen su derecho. ¿Y por qué no se hacen acciones contra Marruecos, que está ocupando por la fuerza? No hay ni una razón, ni histórica, ni de ningún tipo, que les aproxima al Sáhara Occidental, sino la ley de la fuerza, motivada por el hecho de que en el Sáhara Occidental tenemos la desgracia de tener recursos naturales importantes que simplemente Marruecos quiere adueñarse de ellos. No hay otra razón. Por lo tanto, el intergrupo y todos los amigos debemos seguir batallando para que se respete la legalidad internacional, que es la mejor vía para poder cooperar y conseguir que el pueblo saharaui tenga sus derechos. Shukran. Mariela, gracias. Gracias.
Gracias. No, my Spanish is mostly. Thank you.
Tienes una manera elegante de decirle a la gente que es